And do you know what? Dementia is predominantly a female disease. It affects more women than it affects men. You can't ignore signs, and I suppose what I'm trying to say is that you can't say, oh no, it's nothing, because we all seem to think that dementia is if I get stuck with your name, I can't remember your name, or I've forgotten things, or if I've put the milk in the oven and an empty plate in the fridge, or my keys in the fridge. I think those are very obvious signs, but not everyone presents like that. And I think dementia is so prevalent in our society globally. 55 million people are affected by dementia. One day he handed me the wedding ring and he said, "You'll keep it safe," because he was so afraid that he would lose it and he didn't want me to lose it, so he gave it back to me. And I think there was lots of moments like that along the way where you just grieve the loss of your partner. You know, the day that I realized he couldn't do basic arithmetic, you know, the day that I realized he couldn't write properly anymore. So you almost mourn that little loss of the person each time. I feel like I understand why when somebody's been through that journey, they don't want to talk about it.
Disclaimer. The information in this Victory Line podcast is for general informational purposes only. It is not intended as professional advice, including financial, legal, medical, or other expert advice. Always seek the guidance of a qualified professional for your specific situation. The views expressed are those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect those of any associated organisation.
Welcome to the Victory Line podcast. Lion!
Today is about the power of you. You will change the world.
And now your host,
O.P. Jayasinghe. Miss Sadhna Wilson, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So shall we start off with your early childhood? Do you want to go back that far?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Because I think it does define me.
Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. So tell me where were you born?
I was born in Fiji, in Suva, in the capital city, and I lived there for most of my teenage years.
Okay.
It was a short period of time where we lived in Penzance in Cornwall. My dad was on a scholarship in England, so we spent some time there, but most of my childhood was spent in Fiji, and I've been here since 1981.
Did your parents migrate there to Fiji as well, or were they born there?
Fourth generation.
Wow.
I'm fourth generation Indian in my family in Fiji. That was born in Fiji. Yeah.
So, wow. Okay. Yeah. I am finding that there is that much of sort of a generational Indian heritage in Fiji. I didn't actually realize until quite recently. Until my friends told me.
Yeah.
And then you studied there, went to school there.
High school. I moved over to Australia in 1981.
Into Melbourne?
No, Sydney.
Sydney.
So I lived in Sydney for about 9 years, and then moved to Melbourne when my parents migrated.
As well, okay. Do you have any siblings?
One brother.
One brother, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And what were the key milestones as you were growing up, you think? Because I know a big part of your life is about food. Tell me some of the influential things that happen in Fiji pertaining to food.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the memorable things, and you may find this, you may resonate with this a lot, is, you know, we'd all get together living in an extended family, but weekends, like my dad's sisters who had been married and had children, they would come to the family home on weekends. So the house was always full of uncles and aunts and cousins, and, you know, we'd be sitting there having breakfast, but the talk would be, oh, so what are we cooking for lunch? And even though we all ate quite well, but I wouldn't say that it was a lifestyle where we had, there was an abundance, but there was always, we never went without.
Okay.
But, you know, especially like when I went to my grandmother's house, my nanny's house, there was always like, you know, she'd rush out into the backyard because they always had chickens and ducks and stuff, and she'd find a freshly laid egg, and, you know, whatever there was, she would always feed us. So my life revolved a lot around food, and I feel like in my family, as well as in most families in Fiji, I see that love language seems to be around food. We feed each other, you know,
Yeah.
and there's never a knock on the door. People just walk in and out of homes, and there's always something. If it's not chai and some pakoras, we call them pajias, or, you know, there's always something.
Something's going
There's
on.
always something, even if it's just some biscuits with simple butter on it. But we just have this tendency to feed people. So
Yeah, it is a cultural thing, I
Cultural thing,
feel, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah, because you're right. When someone comes to my house as well, it's just like it's almost like a given. You have to feed them.
feed, yeah.
I mean, even this morning when I had the cleaners over, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, come in for the smoothie. And it's just like a normal thing, you know?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And you feel included. You feel included, not even if you walked into a stranger's home, you feel included because all of a sudden you're sitting there with them and you're eating with them. And, you know, a lot of the times we'd all be sitting in a circle
Yeah,
on the floor.
that's true.
But there was always conversation. We never ate in silence.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know though, growing up, like, you know, you would write a cookbook and you would go down that path as a chef?
Well, I'm not a chef.
I know, but
And I don't like being called a chef because I'm a cook and I'm a passionate cook.
okay.
I feel like it's, you know, it's like being a doctor. You study for a long time to get to have that badge of being called a doctor, and it's the same as being a chef.
Chef, okay, so that's why you
have
don't want to.
That's why.
Okay.
That's why I just hate people saying, or dislike, I should say. But yeah, it's because I think you need to do the hard yards.
Yeah, I agree.
You know,
I think
to be.
when you publish that book, would that
Yeah.
give you the title or the no,
No.
it's not. Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
No,
I think you're very
don't think
humble
so.
though.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
But looking back, I think I always had this fantasy of writing a book.
Okay.
You know, like writing a cookbook.
Yeah.
But I never thought I had the ability to or the courage to. But it was always there in the back of my head
Yeah.
that wouldn't it be romantic? Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could write? And the reason I say that I didn't have the confidence, even though that was always in the back of my head, is because I think if I did, I would have spent more time talking to my grandparents, talking to the elders in my family, writing things down, which I didn't. You know, my nani used to make these beautiful, we call them sainas, they're like patra. It's made out of celosia leaves or tara
Okay.
leaves
Okay.
with layers of ground lentil
Yep,
in
yep.
between them. And it's then rolled and then steamed and then, you know, cut and then battered and fried. And she used to make the most divine saina.
Amazing.
And yeah, I feel like I didn't quite, you know, grasp her ability to. And had I known that one day I would follow through on that dream of
Yep.
writing the book, I think I would have spent
A bit
more
more
time.
Yeah.
She used to make these amazing jackfruit pickles. She was known for her jackfruit pickles, and she'd make these, we call them bongo chili in Fiji, which is like a really big red chili, and she used to stuff that with pickle masala and tamarind and
Yum,
then fried
yeah.
in mustard oil. But I just can't quite replicate it.
Yeah,
I think,
I'm hungry
yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about some of
I
these.
know,
Yeah,
but
because
yeah.
jackfruit is a big part of my diet now.
Yeah.
And why did you end up sticking with the vegetarian aspect of it?
My parents are vegetarians. I
Okay.
was vegetarian for a long time until I found that, you know, I needed more iron.
Mm-hmm.
So it was basically a need versus anything else to get
Sure.
more iron. So, and I do tend to eat a lot more vegetables
Yep.
at home. But what I really wanted to do was honor my ancestors by writing their recipes down, and, you know, because it had not been documented before in
Yeah.
Fiji. So I just happened to be sitting next to a PR consultant at a dinner party who was in the food industry, and I was talking to him, and he'd been traveling back and forth from Fiji and loved
The food.
the food and stuff. and explaining to him that I had this vision and I wanted to write a book, but I was getting overwhelmed. It was just dinner party conversation, I was getting overwhelmed because there was so much. Because, in Fiji, you have like the Nepalese living next to the Sikhs, to Gujaratis, South Indians, and then you've got the whole Islamic culture. So, and everyone just shares things, and, so it's sort of like this big mosh posh of like lots of different Indian cuisines.
So you didn't know how to sort of filter out and pick the best.
I did not,
Okay.
and I thought, you know what, I'm going to end up writing a book that is going to be as thick as the Stephanie Alexander book, which is quite thick. And he actually said to me, so why don't you concentrate on one small section?
Okay.
So what's the food of your family? And I said, well, predominantly vegetarian. And that's where the whole...
That's the vegetarian
So
aspect
that's
of it.
the vegetarian aspect of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. That's amazing. In terms of other key milestones that you wanted to touch on as you were growing up, like what was your favorite childhood memory? Can you recall?
Oh my God. My favorite childhood memory is sitting on my grandfather, my dad's father, my Ajah's shoulders, and him walking. My dad's younger sister is 2 years older than me.
Okay.
So we're very similar in
Yep.
age, and I just have this memory of him putting me on his shoulders and him holding my aunt's hand and walking us up the street, which is a slight incline, to get ice creams because, the ice cream man. And I
Yes.
think, I'm not sure if I'm getting this quite right or not, but I think it was almost like on a tricycle that he would come with like this big cart at the
Yes.
front and
Yes.
ring the bell and, I just have that
Beautiful
wonderful memory of
Yeah.
him, yeah. And then another memory I have is of my Aji, my dad's mum, who I was very close to. And so we had the extended family home was along a riverbed in Fiji, in Suva. Out of Suva a little bit, and just remember just sitting with, like little things like peeling like beans, like legumes and stuff, and cleaning pumpkin leaves. And, I have another memory I have of, a lot of it is based around food.
Yeah, that's
And,
amazing. Yeah. I mean, I can
another
see.
memory I have is of my grandmother sitting in front of an open fire cooker of sort that, they used to mold out of pretty much like clay.
Yeah.
And she was making these rotis, and she would roll the roti out, the dough out, and then she would dip the dough into water and then just stick them right onto. So I think that was kind of a version of how naans are made, like
Yes,
how
yes.
tandoori is made, but she was doing it. And I just have that as a vivid memory
Of it.
of her. Another really vivid memory I have of my childhood is my dad's elder brother, who indulged in cooking as well. And he was getting me and my auntie to help him one day. And he cooked some pumpkin until it was fairly soft, but not mashed up. So it was still in chunks. And then what he did was, I think he lit a fire, I'm not sure exactly how or whatever, in a small container. And then he had a big jar with a big mouth on the jar. So he turned, and when it started smoking, he turned this jar over that. He captured all the smoke in there. And then
Yeah.
I remember he then put all the pumpkin that he'd cooked in the jar and closed the lid. So the pumpkin ended up smoking, and then he mashed that and made it into a raita.
Oh, wow.
And the taste and that visual of making that is still very strong in my mind. And I would have probably been maybe 10 years old.
Yeah, you recall that really well,
Yeah,
actually. And
I
as you were
do.
sort of describing it, I
Yeah.
can picture it, like
Yeah.
really visualize what you were saying.
Think,
Clay pot kind of thing? No?
No, it was a glass jar.
Oh, glass jar,
Glass
okay.
jar that he turned with a lid. So he turned that, captured it with smoke. I don't know for what period of time. When it was full of smoke, he quickly put all the cooked pumpkin in there, and it was very simply cooked.
Yeah.
I think it was probably steamed or maybe just, but I remember it in big chunks. And then he just put the lid on. So the smoke was filled in the jar with a pumpkin, and he just let it sit there for a while.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, got that smoky taste
Yeah,
in
that's.
there. And and it's just.
I'm going to be hungry after hearing all these food stories.
Yeah, so-
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so yeah, beautiful memories of Fiji.
yeah.
You've still got family there?
I've still got family, extended family there. My immediate family's here.
Okay.
My son lives here. My parents are here. My brother's here.
Okay. Okay.
But I've got aunties.
Uncles and
Yeah, my cousins are there. And yeah.
nice. Do you get to go often?
Not as often as I would like anymore. For a
Okay.
while, my son was living in Fiji.
Okay.
But now that he's predominantly based here, it's just sort of,
Convenient for you to
yeah,
stay here. No, I totally get you. So since your 20s, maybe late teens, you've been
late
here?
teens, I've been here. Yeah.
Did you study anything at a tertiary level?
I've done interior design
Ah, nice.
and colours, and I did get my builder's license, so I did building and construction.
Okay.
My grandfather was a boat builder,
Okay.
and I think somehow or the other it's just sort of stayed
Yeah.
within me. So I love creativity, and I love, enjoyed building and construction, and then did with my husband Darryl, we did quite a few developments that I oversaw. But I've just worked in the building industry for a while.
Amazing.
Yeah.
As like an owner builder kind of thing? Is that
We
how it works?
did do quite a few developments as owner builders. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I can definitely see the interior design. Like this house is amazingly.
Yeah.
So I'll try and show some footage of this as well. So it's
Thank you, yeah.
amazing. Even the artwork.
My forte is colours.
Yeah, I
It's
can
just,
see.
I love colours. I just don't like walking into a drab, all white interior, and
Yeah. No, I see. If we sort of move over now to sort of the later life, is there any key milestones that sort of shaped who you are today after studying and so forth? Going into that?
I think definitely writing my book
Okay.
gave me, which was in 2017,
yeah.
it gave me a sense of achievement that I had been missing from my life. And I think a lot of it had to do with, as I got older, my brother was the one actually, he started looking into our family history, and he traced our ancestors back in India and went over and met them. And then, he started looking at how they arrived in Fiji and delved into all that side of stuff.
Yeah.
And it kind of like really gave me the courage and inspiration
Yeah.
to do something. But I think also, when you have children, and I've got one son, you want them to have a legacy, especially when you're not living in your home country and you're not surrounded by your families, as we knew, all the families lived very close proximity.
Yeah.
So, it was just that need to leave him a legacy. It was also, and then my brother had 2 children, and it was including them. I really wanted to
Leave
them
that,
to know about the sacrifices that our great-great-great-grandparents really made and the hardships they went through. And it was also about honouring them,
Okay. Because that sort of surprised me that you said that the book was the key milestone, because before that, you and your husband have built businesses, done developments, major things, right? That I suppose one can go, hey, tick, 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 in terms of accomplishment wise. Why was this so? Is it because of the legacy component, do you think?
The legacy, and because this was done on my own. I had my husband's support,
Yeah.
and he was always in the background, but this was all me.
All you. Yes.
Coming up with the idea of the book, coming up with how I wanted the book layout, even doing all the styling for the book and some of the photography. And, it was just all me.
Yeah, amazing.
And I think a big part too is like I've always felt my grandparents' presence in my life, even after they passed away. I think I was very blessed to meet both grandparents on both sides of the family. My mum's parents as well as my dad's parents, and a close relationship with all of them. And I think this is just my way of honoring them.
I mean, it's beautiful.
know,
I haven't had the opportunity to read it yet, but I will. And it's, in terms of cover and stuff like that, and I've got feedback from the likes of John, who, spoke highly about the book as well as yourself.
So, it's just been a really big sense of accomplishment.
Okay. Yeah, amazing. And so I suppose switching gears now in terms of your focus, I know your late husband passed away quite recently.
6 months ago.
6 months ago, so it hasn't, my condolences. I know
Thank you.
it's probably been very hard for you and your family. But what was that journey leading up to it? And I know, so feel free to take your time, and I know it's a sensitive topic, but what was that like? And do you mind going into the details of what happened there?
Well, I think for you to get a real grasp of it, I have to explain the type of person that Darryl was. He was diagnosed with younger onset dementia, which is when somebody under the age of 65 gets diagnosed with dementia. It's called younger onset. So it's not just a natural progression with age. Darryl was always a very vibrant, strong person. He had the strongest mind I know of. Like, he has been able to crawl out of caves and stuff, and I'm talking caves less than a meter high.
Yeah.
So he always was able to put his mind over matter. He just had the most amazing mathematical brain.
Yeah.
And he, very healthy, always very particular with his diet. Of course, he indulged in red wine and stuff, but he wasn't an alcoholic.
Yeah.
He indulged, and he would, we would often share a bottle of wine, the two of us, but he would not sit there drinking lots and lots. So he's so very particular about his health.
Yeah.
He played golf 3 times a week. He walked a lot. He was I'd never seen, from the moment that I met him to when he passed away, he remained very similar weight.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell by the photos that he looks healthy.
Healthy, very, very healthy, and had gone on to build several successful businesses. He was a mechanical engineer by trade, so building machines and stuff was his forte.
Amazing.
As well, but very logical, vibrant, just a good, solid guy.
Yeah,
So,
I suppose that context is important for anyone listening to know, Darryl was active in terms of his mind. His mind was very active, and therefore
very
this
active.
dementia was, you would,
It was really hard to accept. For me, for Darryl, because he was such a stoic person, and he was a fatalist. It is what it is.
Amazing.
Just got to. He embraced it well. For me, it was a real shock. I couldn't understand, and I still try and make sense of it, because even as time has gone on, there's times when it's even harder to understand. It's not like he was diagnosed with a cardiac issue or something was wrong with his kidneys. His superpower was his brain.
Yeah. Okay.
He had a very high IQ, very intelligent person. And I still don't understand how his brain gave up on him. Right. And I think what I'm realizing is that dementia doesn't discriminate.
Okay.
It doesn't discriminate with, your how your body is, whether you're healthy or you're not, how much exercise you do, whether you eat healthily, whether you take care of yourself, your social life. He did Sudoku all the time. He was still very active, even with his numbers. Like I said, he had a really, really high IQ.
Yeah.
And very logical person. And you think, why would it do this to him? Why did his brain give up on him? And then you realize that dementia doesn't discriminate.
What sort of the advice that you've got from medical professionals, like when you've asked the question in vain, why, did they come up with something profound, or did they give you any sort of explanation?
No one can give us an explanation at this stage. I do know that dementia there's several diseases that cause dementia. And I think there's diseases like Parkinson's, and you've got aphasia, which affects your speech, Lewy bodies, you've got alcohol-induced dementia, Alzheimer's. So there's dementia's like a big umbrella. There's lots of diseases that cause dementia.
And Darryl suffered from Alzheimer's.
Darryl had what you would call like a multifaceted dementia. So initially he was diagnosed with aphasia, which is, if you want to put like a point of reference, it's what Bruce Willis has.
Right.
So it's a speech-based dementia.
Okay.
So it affects your speech, it affects your ability for word finding and things. And then slowly over time, it got, we thought he might have Lewy body disease.
What's that one?
Lewy bodies is another type of dementia. And then we worked out that maybe he's got vascular dementia.
Okay.
And then it went, so there was all of these different things. And then finally they said, no, he definitely has Alzheimer's because of the way he was presenting. But then, Darryl was really active for up until maybe 4 or 5 months before he passed away.
Wow.
Really, he was still, so he got diagnosed in early 2021. He was used to always going out. We had a huge food manufacturing factory, and he would go to the factory all the time at different shifts. We had multiple shifts going. He would go all the time. He would address the staff. He would just stand in front of a couple of hundred staff at any given time and talk. He'd been a person who had been asked to MC lots of weddings and stuff, and like very good on his feet. And it was my son's wedding lunch, and there was this was during COVID, one of the COVID lockdowns. So we could only have 30 people at lunch, and it was just mostly immediate family and friends, people that he knew.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't speak. He couldn't see, couldn't bring, and there was something odd about it. And
was that the first instance, or had you known that something was going on?
That was the first instance that made me sit back and think there's something not right here.
Okay.
There's something not right. And to me, at the back of my mind, I kept thinking, he's got a brain tumor. He's got a brain tumor. Because he was starting to occasionally get angry. His logic was slightly starting to wane. Like, he'd just, but he was still, for all intents and purposes, it wasn't anything that you would go, oh, there's something wrong. His memory was still quite intact, but his word finding, and I think that's, because a lot of times people think that dementia, any form of dementia, it's memory loss, and it's not just memory loss.
Okay.
So with Darryl, how it presented itself was with word finding.
As in like a recall of names and
or just
places.
even being able to say it, just
Right.
not being able to say the words.
Okay.
So in the end, it got to a stage where he was not able to communicate very well at all. With a lot of noises, and he would still point out to things and stuff, but we just sort of, I feel like I'm going everywhere.
No, that's okay. This is,
So he was, so it was January 2021 that we felt like there was something not right.
Okay, yeah.
And I kind of had to take the lead there because I knew he wasn't going to do anything. And I think this is something that I really recommend to people, especially if you have a GP that both you and your partner or your parents, like if you have that commonality, that, you know, don't be afraid of reaching out. And I reached out to my GP and I said, I feel like there's something wrong. You know, there's been all of these little things that had been happening, like,
Yeah.
you know, him getting angrier and just little things would trigger him. And then I noticed too, he would sit there, if you were talking to him, he would sit there and he would just pull his ear forward like that. And I feel like he was doing that because he felt he wasn't hearing things, but I don't think it was his hearing. I think he was having, in hindsight,
Yes.
he was having a hard time processing language.
Okay.
So, so I reached out to my GP and I said, look, I feel like there's something wrong. And my GP gave me good advice and he said, look, until Darryl comes in and says something to me, there's no way that I can bring this up because, you know, patient confidentiality. But I'm so glad that I had spoken to him about it because when Darryl went to see him next, which just coincidentally happened in the following week, Darryl was always very mindful. Every year, the beginning of every year, he went for a full physical from the age that he turned 50.
Amazing.
So he would have everything, blood pressure, his prostate, everything checked. So he went to see our GP, and the first thing that he said to the GP was, geez, I made an idiot of myself. I couldn't speak. And thank God that I had actually filled the GP in with that because the GP then had the limited context.
Yeah.
And he said, right, I want you to go and have a CT scan.
Right. So for anyone listening to this that are experiencing similar situations with family, I mean, it's good that you approach the GP as well. Would you recommend that sort of thing? What would you sort of...
Absolutely. I feel like that you can't ignore things. You've got to listen to your instincts. I knew that something was wrong.
Yeah.
I just knew, knowing Darryl so well, I knew that, you know, something was not right. But I honestly believe that he would come back with a diagnosis of a brain tumor because I would, just hindsight too, I would see him sit there and he would just sit there with his head and he was always doing this and stuff. And I think within himself, he wasn't actually saying it, but I think within himself, he was just fine. Processing language was a really big thing for him at that time.
Okay.
And you can't ignore signs. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is that you can't just say, oh, no, it's nothing, because we all seem to think that dementia is if I get stuck with your name, I can't remember your name, or I've forgotten things, or if I've put the milk in the oven and, you know, an empty plate in the fridge, or my keys in the fridge. I think those are very obvious signs, but not everyone presents like that. And I think dementia is so prevalent in our society globally. 55 million people are affected by dementia.
Amazing. Wow.
There's 29,000 people living with younger onset dementia in Australia.
How many did you say?
29,000.
29,000. Okay.
With younger onset, that is below the age of 65.
65.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something really important, and I think this particularly applies to men, you know, mostly men, because they're, I guess, more stubborn than women.
Yeah.
Is to just sort of do the physical check on an yearly basis, like obviously Darryl was doing, which is great. And I think more men aren't doing that. I feel like, I mean, you can't say men or women, but you get what I mean. Yeah, in terms of men think they're all, you know, indestructible, invincible. But I highly encourage anyone who's sort of,
Absolutely. I think that, you know, I think it's very different for women because we talk.
Yes.
And we're quite open with. So men sort of probably hold things in a little bit more, but I think, you know, maybe even from the age of 40, you really need to look at a yearly checkup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yearly checkup, get your prostate checked, get your blood pressure checked, get your heart test done. You've got to also be very mindful of, getting enough sleep. Getting enough sleep is very, very important. It's when your brain processes all the extra protein buildup,
Yeah, there you go.
in your brain.
I'm certainly
So,
guilty of not
yeah,
following that. Yeah,
sleep is very important. So, don't take that lightly.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you can't keep living on 4 hours sleep or 5 hours sleep.
yeah,
You need a good 8 to 12 hours sleep, and that's very important for your body to rest and recuperate as
yeah.
well.
True. When you ended up, when he ended up going for the CT scan, what happened after that?
So the CT scan came back and it showed some grey matter, a little bit of grey. Wasn't anything to be overly concerned about. But, it did take Darryl a while to get the CT scan done because he looked at it and at the request that the doctor had given him, and it said possible short-term memory loss. And he looked at that and he was like, this isn't me. I'm not going to get this done. And he didn't go. He didn't even tell me that he'd been asked to go. He'd had a request to get his CT scan. He brought the piece of paper and he just left it in the desk and didn't even speak about it. Just so happened 2 weeks later, he noticed that he had a brown spot on his thigh, and because he was always playing golf, he thought, I need to go see the doctor about this. He just sort of felt it was a bit like lumpish, and he went over to see the doctor, and first thing the doctor said, I'm not worried about that. How come I haven't received your results yet? And he said, well, I haven't had it done. And so the doctor came down on him like a ton of bricks and said, Darryl, we need that CT scan done. So
Okay. So kudos to this doctor for sort of being a bit more pushy.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it was because of the way, in the desperation, that I'd reached out saying, something's wrong with my husband.
Yes.
I can't make sense of it. He is not the person. He's not behaving like the person that I know.
Yep. You said he sort of got a little bit angry and frustrated. Is it because he couldn't sort of, that recall wasn't there and he's getting frustrated with himself?
I think he was getting frustrated with himself because he felt like, I'm not understanding this, like
What's going
what's
on?
going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he ended up getting the CT scan done eventually.
Scan, yeah. And then we were referred to one neurologist that we saw, and he said, look, I think you need to go and see a different neurologist, somebody who specializes. So we then made time to see a specialist, and this took months. So from like maybe it was so January was when the symptoms first occurred. February was when he was pretty much forced into going for a CT scan. August is when we finally got the diagnosis for aphasia.
Yeah. Okay.
So a speech-based
So can I
language
ask,
issue.
in terms of the delay,
Yeah.
was it just delays with the medical system, or what was the delay?
Yeah, you get, so it's going to take you 3 or 4 months to get in to see a neurologist. So it was more medical system delays, I think, and yeah.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking like, yourself and Darryl have got all the resources that you need in terms of financial resources.
Yeah.
There was no way that you can sort of speed things up?
No, because we were referred to this particular professor who we were really keen to see. So, just sort of took a little bit of time getting there.
Getting the appointment. Okay.
And then you get given this diagnosis that it's a type of dementia, and it's called logopenic primary progressive aphasia, and it's speech-based. And, I honestly don't know how Darryl processed it within himself, but he was very stoic about it.
Yeah.
So, we both thought, okay, he'll slowly lose his ability to speak, but we thought that would be years.
Yeah.
And we knew, having lived through, his father had dementia, but late age dementia. Having lived through, the journey of dementia with his dad, we just thought, okay, we've got time. We really thought we had time. And we thought, okay, this is just going to affect his language. And yes, eventually, when you're late 70s, 80s, well, people's memories start waning anyway. So it was but we really thought
You had time.
had 12 or more years. And from everything that I was reading online, and a lot of it is left for you to do your own research.
Yeah.
Everything that I was reading online, and most people that have younger onset, it can be a slower progress.
Yep.
They're saying, average, 8 to 12 years.
Okay.
And, Darryl still continued to drive until December 2023.
Mm-hmm.
He was still driving. He was driving down to the peninsula every week to play golf. He was still playing golf. He was still attending business meetings. He was still signing off on paperwork and, doing all of the things that, yes, there was times when he would just say, oh, no, I can't remember that. But it wasn't anything that was, there was a very small margin of deterioration.
Mm-hmm.
There was deterioration, but it was
Yeah.
a very small margin. And then come December 2023, it was like somebody took him to the edge of a cliff and pushed him. It
Okay.
was like he came spiraling down.
Did something happen? Like, was there dietary change,
Nothing-
medical intervention?
Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing out of the ordinary. We had started embracing the Mediterranean diet when he was diagnosed, because that's meant to be very good for dementia
Okay.
patients and just in general brain and heart health.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up, well, I could hear him. He went downstairs and he had a car that had a very loud engine. And I'm waiting. So I was upstairs and he was supposed to go and visit his uncle, who he met with every Tuesday morning in Carlton for a coffee. And I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm like, oh, I must have missed it. Or maybe he took the car off sport mode and that's why I'm not hearing any noise. And he must have driven off. And a good 15 minutes passed, and I heard the door open downstairs, and he came upstairs and he was as white as a ghost. And I'm like, what's happened? And he said, I don't know how to do it. I'm like,
As in, he doesn't know how to drive?
yeah. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I don't know how to do it. Will you come and sit in the car with me? So I went and sat in the car with him.
Oh my goodness.
And he's like, what do I do? What do I do?
Oh my God.
So I went through the motions of showing him, but then I said to him, Darryl, this isn't safe. You can't get in the car and you can't drive to Carlton. This is not safe. And he sat there. I can still see the look on his face, devastated. He sat there and then, finally we came upstairs and he said, you're right. And it's when he said to me, okay, we've got to do something about my license. Because prior to that, he was getting OT tests every year to make sure that he was able to drive. And he was still able to drive. He didn't get one parking ticket, no accidents. He didn't scrape any cars, nothing. So there was nothing up until that time in December that we just realized he couldn't drive. And it was like out of the blue.
Oh my goodness, I'm lost for words.
Yeah.
That I could...
It was literally like overnight.
Okay.
And
And you said you were doing much of the research yourself, just trying to understand. And is this why you feel like you need to speak out about this and be an advocate almost for what's
I
of other
feel
people?
like all too often, and I totally understand, and there is no judgment because the journey is very tough. I mean, there was lots of things along the way, like prior to Darryl not being able to drive, that, I think he himself was starting to get a little bit shaky with, what happens if because he used to take his wedding ring off for golf. So I think a couple of times he forgot where he put the wedding ring, so he was starting to get shaky. So I think it was about November or something, and he came to me one day and he handed me the wedding ring and he said, "You'll keep it safe."
Oh,
Because he was so afraid that he would lose it and he didn't want me to lose it, so he gave it back to me. And I think there was lots of moments like that along the way where you just grieve the loss of your partner. The day that I realized he couldn't do basic arithmetic,
yes.
the day that I realized he couldn't write properly anymore. So you almost mourn that little loss of the person each time, so I feel like I understand why when somebody's been through that journey, they don't want to talk about it
Yeah.
because it is reliving everything. But for me, it is the only way I can process things.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's giving our journey purpose, because I firmly believe that whatever we go through in our life has to have meaning and purpose. Things just don't happen for the sake of happening. And I feel like I want to talk about it and make people aware and share Darryl's journey, not only to honor him, but also to give this journey some sort of purpose.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. Especially because you was, by his side through the very end, went through as the primary carer, right? Yeah. What advice would you have for someone who's in your position, who is acting as the primary carer and looking after someone in a similar situation?
So from the time that Darryl was diagnosed, our specialist, and I'm going to say our specialist because they were there for me and my mental health just as much as they were there for Darryl and, monitoring the disease and stuff. They were telling me that you've got to engage a carer now. You can't do this on your own. But we just thought, no, we can. We can do this on our own. And Darryl doesn't need a carer.
Yeah.
Essentially, he was fine. He was still able to do all the things and, so we didn't really see the need of engaging a professional carer. He had family, as in my son, my daughter-in-law were there constantly supporting him. He had really good friends who supported him and they'd sometimes come and pick him up and take him to golf or, certainly be mindful of, to go to the footy with him and stuff. But Darryl would arrive on a tram by himself, and but he did have a lot of support from his friends, and certainly my son and daughter-in-law. But I didn't quite understand the reasons of and the importance of having a professional carer, because I ended up engaging a carer for Darryl in March last year, in 2024, when things really started to deteriorate. And at that time, my aunt had passed away with dementia and she had cancer as well. And my uncle had MCI, which is mild cognitive disorder. So it was, I was being stretched every which way.
Yep.
And I had to engage a carer because things were starting to get, he was starting to forget by March, he was starting to forget how to brush his teeth, and he was starting to forget how to have a shower. And I found, because he was 6'2" and still very healthy and broad, and I just found it really difficult to manage things on my own. But it was I was starting on the back foot, because what I hadn't quite grasped was,
He would
by
see
that
this.
time, his memory wasn't really good. So he would remember the carer
I was
one
just going
day,
to say
and then
this.
he'd be, "Who are you? Why is this stranger in my house?"
Yeah.
Whereas if we had engaged a carer earlier on in the journey,
Yeah.
he would have become familiar with this person. And in the end, he needed more than one carer and me there constantly by his side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really valid point actually,
Yeah.
because engaging them early,
Yeah.
familiarize yourself
Yeah.
with okay.
And the importance of looking at a nursing home, being realistic. When you see your parent or your aunt, your uncle, your partner deteriorate, I think you've got to be realistic about the situation. And so when they start getting to a stage where they can't have a shower by themselves and they're having feeding issues and they start wondering, I mean, that's probably about the right time to start thinking about putting them into a home.
Right.
Because you
Okay.
can't do everything by yourself. And I think the worst situation, which people don't realize, is if under your watch, if they fell and broke their hip bones and stuff. I mean, how would you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
And especially as you said, 6'2".
6'2".
Yep.
Yeah. But also, I think I saw a huge change in Darryl when he went into care, in the sense, like, the girls would come around with their guitars, and they would sing with him and dance and, do art therapy, things that we tried doing at home, but he would always, he'd do it for 5 minutes and then he'd give up.
Okay.
And whereas with other residents, he was a lot more ready, eager to do things,
do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
How long was he there?
So Darryl in the end got diagnosed with BVFTD, which is a behavioral frontotemporal dementia, which started affecting his behavior. So he went into care. We had to actually call an ambulance because he got very violent in April, on the 24th of April last year. And from there, he got assessed at Monash at the hospital, and they said I couldn't take him home, which was devastating.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was devastating because I was coming back every night to my home, but I was leaving him initially in respite and then in a psych unit because his behavior started to get worse. And in Australia, we don't actually have facility for people with younger onset dementia. And Darryl needed to be in a secure unit, in a lockdown unit, which, if you look at a lockdown unit in a nursing home, they're full of really old, frail people, because as dementia progresses with old age, that's when they start having behavior issues and wandering and stuff. So having somebody who's strapping and strong and stuff, there's just no availability. There's no organisations, there's no nursing homes that cater to younger onset dementia. So in the end, we had no choice, but Darryl had to go into a psych unit at a hospital.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so which is very confronting.
Yeah.
Being in a psych unit, and it's confronting, but it just plays out. I just don't understand how my husband went from being the life of a party to being in a psych unit.
Yeah. You're very brave for, speaking out about this and keeping it together. Because as you said, that incident was just 12 months ago, you know. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And
But I knew the day that I got a call, Darryl's carer had accompanied him down to our place in Sorrento, and I was due to go that evening. And when I got the phone call, I just knew. I knew that was Darryl wasn't coming home. I don't know how or why, but I just, that deterioration in him was so
yeah.
quick. And then
Do you know why the deterioration happened with Darryl a lot more than what you've read on the online?
no, and that's the thing, like dementia is just such a vast
Yeah.
disease, and there's just still not enough known about it.
Okay.
So no one can explain to me why it progressed the way it did. Because essentially, he was fully functioning early December 2023.
Yes.
And then March, there was deterioration happening. And I could see that it was going fast, but not as fast as, you know, how things happened. And then he, you know, being in care from pretty much late April to being in a psych unit, and, you know, late August, we could see that he had an infection. And that's because, you know, with the aphasia, as aphasia progresses, the inability to speak, it's all connected to your ability to swallow as well. So he was having difficulty swallowing, and he aspirated and ended up getting pneumonia
Okay.
and died.
That's how he passed away.
That's how he passed away, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. Well, the journey, I suppose. And you're right. The fact that you have the courage to speak out about this is amazing. So well done to you. I hope anyone listening to this can take something away. I mean, the lessons that I got is, you know, don't be afraid to get the checkups early. Don't be afraid to engage help early. Yeah.
And do you know what? Dementia is predominantly a female disease.
Okay, I
It
didn't know
affects
that.
more women than it affects men.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you see your journey now, Sadhana? Like, I know you've obviously had a roller coaster over 12 months and beyond. What's the future like for you now?
I feel like this is my calling. I feel like everything I've done in my life up until now has been preparing me for what I see as a new role in my life, and that is dementia education and support and helping people and just being there as a guide to them. Because, you know, initially when you get diagnosed, you're told to go home and put your affairs in order. But what are those affairs? How do you put them in order?
That's
You know,
true.
and I find it's specifically in our sort of culture that we don't talk about stuff like that. Oh, you know, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'll get the will made. But there's so much more that goes
And that's what I was going to ask you.
into things like that, you know. And I think there's just not enough education, or there's not enough vulnerability within family members to embrace and support each other through just so much little steps that go into, you know,
Okay.
the journey, like, you know, yeah.
So what do you recommend, you know, when they say get your affairs in order? Are you referring to the wills, the trusts, the companies, that everything that this person was controlling, or, you know, from a day-to-day basis?
Yeah,
Just
but no, I think this goes beyond that. I think it also goes to the level of getting your family together and sitting down and talking to them, not just getting everything written down on paper, but also sharing with your family what your wishes are for when you eventually do pass away. What are your wishes like going into a nursing home? I mean, it's about embracing the reality and saying, this is where my life is headed, but let's get together and go and have a look at a nursing home. Let's look at some facilities. Let's talk to a few people. You know, what your end of life is, do you want to get put on a life support?
Okay, have all those discussions early as possible and
early
get the
as
family
possible.
involved.
Yep, get the family involved.
Yeah.
And then it's up to the family as well. They have to involve themselves as well. Like, if your parents get diagnosed with dementia, like, do the research. We live in an age where we have so many organizations like Dementia Australia and Alzheimer's associations, but also YouTube. And, there's so many places, and it's not specific to Australia. You could go to a Alzheimer's Association in Canada and see what research is being made. It does come down to education, and it does come down to being very aware, not burying your head in the sand, because you just don't know how quickly the disease escalates or how slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right when you mentioned, it could be 10, 12 years that, you were thinking that it'll play out, but it happened so quickly.
Because Darryl was healthy. He was healthy, he was fit, he was socially active. He played golf and he cycled and he swam and he read. He played chess.
Yeah.
He did his Sudoku every day. Sat down and read the paper every day.
That's so true. Amazing. I know you mentioned this word a couple of times. You said Darryl was quite stoic in his thinking. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? In how was that his approach to life?
It was his approach to life.
Okay.
Yeah. And Darryl didn't shy away from talking about his disease either.
Okay.
And I remember him coming home one day and he's like, oh man, people complain about their golf shots. They've had a bad shot and then the rest of the game is totally spoiled because they've had one bad shot and they let it linger on their mind. And he said, next time this happens, I'm going to tell them, mate, let's change places.
Let's change places.
Let's change places.
It's all about perspective.
Yeah, it's all about perspective. I not once saw him feel sorry for himself. And I don't know how he did that. I felt sorry for him. I felt sorry for myself. Why am I going through this? Why is my husband going through this? Why are we going through this? I didn't once hear him feel sorry for himself. I didn't hear him actually a lie about that. In the end, when he couldn't, and this is probably 4 or 5 weeks before he passed away, when he couldn't understand the disease, he didn't even know,
He
it'd
had
be
it
like,
kind of thing.
it'd be, what's wrong with me? And you'd tell him you've got dementia. And then he'd get angry. How can you say, and then you could see him starting to get a little bit, he wasn't in control of his mind.
He wasn't,
then.
yes. Yeah.
But for as long as, he was just, okay, I've got this issue. Okay, what do I do about it? How do I deal with it? And it was just his approach to life.
Yeah, I love that. And you could tell the way that he's, obviously built the businesses, done the developments, and done everything that his life because of that mindset, right?
Yeah.
That very solid mindset of how he's been able to achieve so much.
So much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a very principled man. Very principled man. And you always knew where you stood with him. He wasn't one to mince his words. If he saw you doing something wrong, he would pull you up on it, but not in a cocky, arrogant way. But, in a firm way, he would tell you you're doing the wrong thing. And, he'd...
I love that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'd rather deal with people like that than people who sort of make side comments and you don't know where you stand with them. It's very hard to deal with people like that.
Yeah. As I've been going through his things, I've just been finding a lot of things, and I'm like, oh, now I understand why he was like this, and now he had his sheets of paper, and one of them his 10 points of approaching a business, and one of the things in there, and one of the things on there is that he will never be late with payments, and he never was late making a payment. He will never pay interest on his credit card, and he was very structured about things. He will walk his business in the sense that he wasn't just going to sit in the ivory tower in the office. He literally would go out and he would talk to the people on the machines, on the production line. He would talk to everyone. He would at times just walk into the factories at really odd times just to see not to check up on people, but just to see that safety was very important to him.
Yeah.
People's safety was very important, so he was always, there's no compromise on
safety.
On safety with,
Yeah.
the machines needed to be serviced, they needed to be serviced,
Oh, I love that. So, I mean, if you do end up starting a blog or a vlog for, it would be wonderful to share stories like that. Even the 10-point checklist,
Yes,
budding entrepreneurs,
Real-
aspiring
yeah.
entrepreneurs would love that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm so glad that he wasn't the sort of person who'd sit there and, tell you this is what you've got to do. And, he just did it. He followed it. He wrote it down and he followed it. And that was for himself.
Yeah.
And if somebody asked him, yes, he would, but he wouldn't push his opinion on you. But I do know he and my nephew, Rohan, who's 12 at the moment, they had a very, very strong connection with each other. And I'm glad that Darryl's had that written down because I now have something to pass, something tangible, and like I said, he wasn't a person who would sit there and push his opinions on you for nothing. So I'm so glad that I found, and there's like 28 different pages of things that I found
really?
that
Okay.
I think,
I'm sure people would, get so much value out of that.
Yeah.
Not someone who's, done just the talking, but actually lived this life and practiced it and applied it.
Exactly. And he was always, oh my God, not again, Daz. Like from early on in our relationship, I'm like, we've still got 10 minutes, we'll be 10 minutes early. What's the hurry? No, but to him, and it's only when I found all these pieces of paper that I realized he always said
Be on time?
be on time.
I know. And when I was late today, I'm going, this isn't me. I can't believe I'm happening. So
be on,
be on time.
Respect other people's time,
Yes,
and he would rather be there 10 minutes early. Yeah. Than be late.
I wish I got to meet him.
Yeah, I know. And I have had a lot of phone calls over the last, few months, especially from his staff members and people that he's mentored saying, Sadi, do you realise, Daz told me this and I still remember that. And a lot of it had to do with, time, respecting people's time.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm sure the way he taught, the mindset would have been passed on to his the people that he mentored, for sure.
Everyone that he mentored, even, I certainly know that he was a great mentor to my son and a lot of my friends who would reach out to him and say, Daz, we've got this business idea, how do you think? And he would always just be very mindful and he would say, okay, so, realistically, I see this and this and this in your character trait that could hold you like, let's attack this first, let's strengthen this, you're not good at savings, for example, or, so let's put a budget together. So he was very lateral thinking like that. He would help you, but it wouldn't be, what you want to hear. It'd be like, let's
do it properly.
Yeah.
I love this. Thank you for so much for sharing.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of topics. Anything that you wanted to touch on that we haven't discussed already? While you're thinking about that, I want to show everyone Sadhna's book.
Yeah.
That's okay. So this is the book, everyone. Sadhna's book. If you wanted to get it on Amazon, I think it's on Amazon. So I'll leave the link. It's amazing. Very colorful. Beautiful.
It's got lots of stories of my childhood, lots of me growing up.
Okay.
and just how I saw the world, I think.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
definitely.
Yeah.
Looking forward to reading that.
Yeah. I think, you know, when you're growing up, we can all go look at our friends and stuff, and we all seem to think the grass is always greener on the other side. And, you know, but why isn't my family like this? And why? I now, as with age, I now feel so privileged to have been born into the family that I was born into, because I believe that I've had some very valuable, very strong lessons in life, strength of character.
In terms of like humble beginnings, kind of.
Humble beginnings, but not only that, but just, you know, how you treat people around you, how you view life, how you,
Yeah,
and I feel very privileged for that.
yeah. I can
Yeah.
definitely, you know, see that from you as well, the way you treat people. Yeah, amazing. Anything else?
I think what I'd like to really share with a lot of people is that we're living in an age now where everything is curated. Everything's curated. You go on an Instagram, your photos are curated, the message you're giving people, everything is curated. We only put on things, we post things that are just, you know, oh, look,
highlights.
the highlights where I've been.
Highlights.
I think we're losing our authenticity.
Yeah,
You know, it's a virtue that we're really losing. And I think that we've got to start embracing our authenticity a lot more.
yeah, yeah. That is so true. I
Yeah.
100% agree. And I think this is why I love this sort of long form content where we're just able to speak and it's like unedited content and people get to see the whole story,
Yeah.
which is good.
And I think the other thing too, we're also living in a world where life's just so transient. You know, kids come and go, they have their own lives. Parents are going, everyone's busy, everyone's going here, then everywhere. I think it's so important to have at least one meal a day together as a family.
Great advice.
You know, one meal a day.
Yeah.
And it's not a time where you sit down and you ostracize each other, but it's a time where you spend getting to know each other.
So important. I love that.
And
No digital devices.
no
Just
digital devices. Also, you know, it's so important to be talking to your children and your family about current issues. You know, there's no current issues, not just in the paper, but things that are happening in your family. There
Family
really
lives.
isn't a reason why, as a family, if a grandparent is going through something like dementia, why you can't all just sit down and say, but how is that making you feel? Like, you know, or even just telling your children, you know, with time, maybe your grandmother may not remember your name.
That's important, isn't it?
Just talking about all different issues, you know, just
Yeah.
talking about what's happening in other countries and stuff. But I think all too often we just end up being trying to discipline our families.
Yeah.
And we lose that ability to connect with them. And I think it's so important to connect with your children, your parents, you know, it goes both ways, your grandparents, brothers and sisters, and just find out what's happening in their life.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
That two-way
That two-way communication
is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like I'm guilty of it as
Yeah.
well. You know, often the lecturing and telling long stories to my
Yeah.
kids. They're going, oh no, not another lecture.
Yeah.
But it's like it's not a lecture, it's a story.
Yeah, it's a story,
yeah.
but yeah. And maybe giving them the onus of, okay, you know, Friday, and I've been to a couple of Jewish friends to their house for dinner, and I love how on a Friday night, you know, it's the kids at dinner time. They recite all their holy words. It's left to the kids to do, you know. It's sort of like a and they talk about what they've done at school, and, you know, whether they had a reading, and they read it out to the family, and, you know, it's very inclusive, and I love being
Yeah.
part of of that. So I've actually said to my family, I'm going to, at the moment, it's a bit hard because I've got my house for sale. So I'm being very, very tidy. But I've actually said to my family, you know what? I'm going to start a jigsaw puzzle when things sort of settle down. I'm going to start a jigsaw puzzle. And I don't care who walks in that door. You've all got to find 3 pieces. Every single time you walk into my door, look, it's going to be set on the dining table. I want you to do find three pieces and
I
put
love
it
that.
together.
I've seen this being done at workplaces.
Yeah.
But yeah, amazing doing it at home where
Yeah.
you connect with
Yeah.
kids and family.
And also, you know, I think one of the other things, and Darryl and I talked about embracing this, but then we went into COVID lockdown and stuff, and unfortunately we couldn't quite embrace it. But Sunday night dinners, you know, with the family, and I realised life is busy and it'll be, okay, whoever can be there, be there.
Be there.
So it doesn't mean that we give up just because somebody's got a wedding to go to or whatever. Because if you sit back and you wait for everyone to have a perfect clear diary, it just
It doesn't
happen.
Yeah, you're right.
You know,
At the moment, what I've been
and
doing is
yeah.
just setting the time.
Yeah.
Whoever can make it, makes it.
And I've also said to, like, you know, my niece is living with me at the moment, and my son and his wife. I want to meet your friends. Bring them home.
Yeah.
You know, when we start our Sunday night dinners, just whoever, like,
Make it
let's
happen.
embrace it, because that's how I grew up in Fiji.
Yeah.
All of my uncles and aunts, their friends were uncles and aunts to us, like, you know. So people think, how many uncles and aunts have you got?
Mm-hmm. No, it's a
because
cultural
that's
thing.
a cultural thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think
absolutely.
it's something that I want to re-embrace, because for a very long time I have let that go, but I really want to re-embrace that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Before we wrap up, tell me about your favorite holiday destinations, because I know you've traveled quite a bit.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Oh my God. Traveling. Too many. Paris is home to me, like it's home away from home.
Okay.
I just don't know why. When I'm there, nothing bothers me.
Okay.
Absolutely nothing bothers me. Having said that, though, it's a place where I really can't get myself to go at the moment, because I think that's just part of my grief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that Darryl embraced about me, and he was always happy for me to go. Even actually, he surprised me with a trip to Paris in November 2023. So just before he started going down, so I was in Paris for 10 days.
Okay.
So yeah, Paris is somewhere where I really feel comfortable. But our last overseas trip together was to India, and we'd been to India several times. But our last trip was to Shimla and to Chandigarh and Amritsar, and you know, those memories are beautiful. I know that it's just so peaceful, absolutely peaceful. But there's still a lot of the world to discover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Last question, where can people find you?
Um,
Do you have a favorite social media site or that?
yes, you can probably find me under the Tropical Indian.
Okay.
I have been very quiet on social media, but yes, please do engage, and I will look at your messages and reach out to you. So the Tropical Indian, there's also another Instagram handle that I'm setting up at the moment. It's called Dealing with Dementia.
Okay.
And you'll find it under Dealing with Dementia, or if you just under Instagram look for Sadhna, Darryl and Sadhna Wilson, Darrel.
I'll put all the links anyway.
And Sadhna Wilson. Oh, I'm on Facebook under Sadhna Wilson.
Okay.
So I'm, hoping to get my act together
And
and get a website and, all
you're
that
going
sort of
through
stuff
so
happening.
much. So
but yeah.
you're going through so
Yeah.
much. So pace yourself. But I think you're
Yeah.
doing really well. Even
Thank you.
after such a short period of time,
Yeah.
you're able to speak about it, which most people aren't. And getting the awareness out is so
Yeah.
important, and you're doing a great job.
Because I feel like I need to be in control. This disease can't control me. This journey can't control me. I need to be in control of it.
Yeah.
And if I just sit back, I feel like I'm letting it win, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I need to make sense and give it some purpose, and I need to be in charge of it rather than it being in charge of me. It's controlled my life for far too long.
Yeah. I mean, it's been quite a journey, right?
Yeah.
Emotionally, I can't even imagine. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Final thoughts?
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all.
I
Thank you
feel
so much.
very grateful that I met you, and
I know.
this has been
Through our mutual friend
wonderful.
Johnny.
John, yes. Hi, John.
Hi, Johnny.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Till next
you.
time.
Yeah. Till next time.